Welcome back to Inside the Philippines. Today's story starts with a question we get in the comments almost every week, usually typed in capital letters. Why do Filipinas want foreigners? What's the real reason? And most of the answers people give you are one of two. It's love or it's a scam. Pick a side, argue in the comments, everybody goes home happy. The man you're about to hear from found a third answer. And I'll be honest with you, I think it's the harder one to sit with. His name is Gunnar Oberg, 52 years old, from Gävle, a coastal town about 2 hours north of Stockholm, Sweden. He was a butcher for 31 years, the last 19 of them running his late father's shop. Quiet man. Careful man. The kind of man who counts things. Then he came into money he never asked for, lost something he assumed he'd never lose, and went looking for a table to sit at. 3 years later, there's a concrete house standing in northern Cebu with his money in every wall of it, on land he could never legally own. But that's getting ahead of things. This one's going to stick with you. Here's his story, in his own words. I closed the shop in February. My mother died in January. I want to say those two things are not connected, because people assume, but they are not. The shop was already finished. Coop and ICA had the contracts, and a butcher on Norra Kungsgatan who cuts everything himself is a nice thing for a town to have and not a thing anybody buys from on a Tuesday. So, nobody's fault. It was nobody's fault. 31 years I did that work. 19 of them, the shop was mine. Before that, it was my father's, and I stood beside him. You learn a certain thing standing in a shop like that. Somebody comes in, they have 4 minutes with you, maybe 5. They tell you what they want. Sometimes they don't know what they want, and you tell them. They trust you completely for those 4 minutes, because you have the knife, and they don't. And then they leave, and you never think about them again. I thought, this made me good with people. I want to say that early, because it explains most of what comes after. My mother was ill for a long time, almost 2 years at the end, and the last 3 weeks in the hospital in Gävle. My brother Anders came twice. My sister Katarina came more. I'll be fair, she came often enough. But I was the one there in the evenings because I had nothing else. The shop was closing anyway. What else was I going to do? Then, the will. The house and the building on Norra Kungsgatan came to me. Only to me. And here's the thing I did not know, and this is God's honest truth. My father decided that 10 years before he died. 10 years. He wrote it. He told nobody. And then he died. And my mother kept it exactly as it was, and also told nobody. Not me, not Anders, not Katarina. I found out in an office in Gävle, with a lawyer reading it out, and my brother sitting 3 chairs away, finding out at the same second I did. The reception was at my house afterward. I made the food. I want you to understand that properly. I cut it. I cooked it. I put it on the table. Because that is what I know how to do, and I did not know what else to do with my hands. 17 people. I counted, which tells you something about the kind of evening it was. Anders said one sentence to me. He came past the table and he said, "You worked on her the whole time she was dying, didn't you?" Not shouting. Just said it, the way you'd mention the weather. And then he took his coat. Katarina left with him. She didn't say anything at all, which I've decided is worse, although some days I decide the opposite. 17 people ate my food. Nobody sat with me. That was 14 months before I made the profile. And I don't want to make it dramatic because Swedes are not dramatic. We are not built for it. Nothing happened in those 14 months. That's the whole point. Nothing happened. Christmas came. I was not invited. Katerina has a place outside Sandviken, and there's always Christmas there, always, since we were children. And that year my phone did not ring, and I sat in the flat and ate herring standing up at the counter like a man in a bad film. My nephews took me off Facebook. Anders's boys, both of them, and I noticed within about a day, and pretended for a week that I hadn't. Then I thought about it for a month. That's the ratio, isn't it? 1 second to do it, 1 month to carry it. And the mornings. I still woke at 4. 31 years your body gets up at 4 because there is work at 5. And now there was no work at 5. No shop, no deliveries, nothing to break down. I would lie there in the dark, with the whole body ready to go and nowhere to put it. I started walking. Down to the river, along past the old customs house, back. 40 minutes. I did that every morning for 14 months, and I want to tell you something honest. I did not feel sad, exactly. I felt like a piece of furniture in a room where somebody had moved everything else out. Now, the money. The house and the building sold together. After the mortgage was cleared, it came to just over 1.2 million kroner. About $118,000 if you want it that way. I had never had that. Not close. A butcher in a small Swedish town does fine, you understand. We are not a poor country, and I was never poor. But I had never seen a number like that with my name attached to it, and I had absolutely no idea what a person is supposed to do with it. I have never owned a share of anything in my life. Not one. My father didn't believe in it, and I never thought about it enough to disagree with him. So what I did was, I checked it. Every morning. I would come back from the walk, and make coffee, and open the bank on the phone, and look at the number. The way another man looks out the window to see what the weather's doing. It was still there. Fine. Good. Now what? I did nothing with it for over a year. People think money like that is freedom. It isn't. Not by itself. It was a thing in my flat that I was responsible for and could not use, because everything you would spend it on, a boat, a trip, a bigger place, those are all things you do with somebody. And I did not have a somebody. I had a brother who thought I stole from a dying woman, a sister who let him think it, and 4 minutes a customer for 31 years, which I'd apparently mistaken for a social life. 52 years old. No shop. No family. A quarter more money than sense. I'm not going to pretend I was strong about it. There were evenings that autumn I sat with the laptop open on a country I could not have found on a map 3 years earlier, reading about the cost of a house in a province I could not pronounce, and I told myself I was only curious. I was not only curious, but I need to go back a bit, because before any of that, there was a woman named Josie, and she had nothing to do with any of it. And she is the reason for all of it. Josie worked the palliative ward at Gavle sjukhus. She was maybe 40, from Iloilo, and she had been in Sweden 11 years. I don't know what her surname was. That's a thing I think about now, actually. 11 years in my country, 3 weeks in my life, and I never asked her surname. She was the one who brought coffee. Not for my mother. My mother wasn't taking anything by then. For me. She'd come in around 8 in the evening with 2 paper cups, and put one on the windowsill next to my chair, and she'd say, "Drink. You look gray." And one evening, she asked how I was. That sounds like nothing. I know it sounds like nothing. But you have to understand that in 3 weeks of that ward, doctors, nurses, my sister twice, a priest we didn't ask for, not one person asked me how I was. They asked about my mother, which is correct. That's what you ask about. But Josie asked about me, and I sat there with a paper cup and could not think of a single word to say. She talked instead, which I think she did on purpose. She had 4 younger brothers and sisters back home. She sent money every month. She'd been sending money every month for 11 years, and that year it was going toward a new roof on her mother's house in a place called Pasi, because the old one was tin and rusted through in 2 places, and the rain came in over the kitchen. I remember asking her, this is embarrassing. I asked her when she'd finish paying for it, and she looked at me like I'd asked when she'd finish having a family. She said, when it's done, there will be something else. Not bitter, not complaining. She said it like a butcher saying there'll be another delivery Thursday. Then the roster changed, and she went to another ward, and I never saw her again. My mother died on the 22nd of January, and Josie wasn't there for it, and I have wondered since whether I would have got through that night better or worse if she had been. And here's the strange part. One started reading about the Philippines. Not to meet anyone. I want to be clear on that, because I've told this story twice before, and both times the other person smiled at me in a certain way at this point. It was not that. I read about it the way a man reads about a car he isn't going to buy. Population. Islands. 7,000 something, which I found ridiculous and kept telling people at the shop, back when there was a shop. Typhoons. Rice. The fact that a nurse's salary there is maybe $25,000 a month, which is about 4,000 kroner, and that a country exports its own people because that arithmetic doesn't work. I read for months. Then the shop closed and my mother's will happened and Anders happened, and honestly I stopped reading about anything at all for a while. 8 months. That's the gap. 8 months of the river walk, and the 4 a.m., and the number on the phone. And then, in October, I made a profile on Christian Filipina. I picked that site specifically. There were others. Filipino Cupid is the big one. Everybody knows Filipino Cupid. But the pictures on it made me feel like a man in a bar at closing time. And I have never once in my life been comfortable in a bar at closing time. Christian Filipina looked like a church hall. Sober. Slightly dull. Women in their 30s and 40s with sensible photographs. That was my logic. I chose the sober one because I thought sober meant safe. I've had time to think about that. Choosing the respectable-looking door doesn't change what's in the building, but at the time I felt clever, and I want to include the parts where I felt clever, because otherwise this story doesn't teach anybody anything. My profile was terrible. 2 photographs, one of them of me holding a pike I caught in 2019. Under occupation I wrote butcher, retired. Under about me I wrote 4 lines. I think one of them was about liking to cook, which is true, and also the least interesting thing a butcher can say. She messaged first. Maravich, 36. Pharmacy assistant at a Mercury drug branch in Bogo City, which is up at the north end of Cebu Island, about 3 hours from Cebu City on the bus. Everyone called her Bing. Her first message said she liked that I put my job as butcher because her lolo, her grandfather, had been a butcher at the public market in Bogo. And did I also do it at 4 in the morning? 4 in the morning. That got me. Of course it got me. Now. Here is the thing I built the next 3 years on, so I'll take my time with it. 11 weeks. 11 weeks? We messaged and video called, and she did not ask me for 1 or. Not 1. No emergency. No load. No sick auntie. Nothing. We talked at odd hours because Cebu is 6 hours ahead in winter, so my evening was her late night, and my early morning, and I had a lot of early mornings available. Was her afternoon. She'd video call from the back of the pharmacy on her break, in the uniform, this pale blue thing with her name on a badge, and behind her there'd be shelves and a fan turning and somebody's radio. She had a laugh that came out too loud, and then she'd cover her mouth, like she'd been told off for it as a girl. She taught me kain, eat, because I started cooking again. properly, for the first time since the shop. So I'd have something to hold up to the camera. Pork with prunes, calops. I showed her a whole shoulder I'd boned out on the kitchen table on a Sunday for no reason at all. And she went absolutely silent. And then said her Lolo used to do it exactly that way, with the knife flat like that. And I stood in my kitchen in Gavela at 11 at night feeling like somebody had opened a window. Eldest of 5, father dead, drowned off a fishing boat when she was 19. Mother, Delia. 2 younger sisters, 2 brothers, the youngest called Jomar. Her salary at the pharmacy was P13,500 a month, around 2,300 kroner, call it $240, and around 8,000 of it went home. She told me all of this in the first 3 weeks, unprompted, the way you'd tell someone the weather. That's important. It was never a secret. Nothing in this story was ever a secret. It was around week 12 or 13 that I offered money. Me. I offered. She said no. I offered again a few days later, made it smaller, said it was for load and fare so she could call me without watching the balance, and she said no again. And then she said, I did not talk to you for this. I pushed a 3rd time, and a man ought to ask himself why he's pushing that hard, but I didn't. She accepted 6,000 learned a month, about 1,000 kroner, $110, give or take, and the day it landed, she sent me a photograph of the G-cash receipt, without me asking, and then another photograph a week later of what she'd bought with it, which was mostly rice and a school shoe for a niece. Then she did it the next month. And the next. Months 4 to 9, that was the whole shape of my life. 6,000 pesos. A receipt. A video call at 11 at night. And a woman laughing too loud in a pharmacy in a town I could not have pronounced a year earlier. I thought I had tested her. That's what I want you to hear. I didn't think I'd been lucky. I thought I had run a test, and she had passed it. And now the matter was settled. The flight was Stockholm to Doha. Doha to Cebu. 17 hours with the change. I had not been further than Mallorca in my life, and I had never once flown alone. You step out of Mactan Airport, and the air puts a hand on you. That's the only way I can describe it. In Gävle, in March, you walk out of a building, and the cold takes something from you. There. It gives you something you didn't ask for. My shirt was through in 4 minutes. I stood on the pavement with my bag, a big gray Swede in a hat, and about 9 men asked me if I wanted a taxi. Then, 3 hours north on the series bus to Bogo. Windows open, no air conditioning on that one, and everything going past. Sorry stores with the sachets hanging in strips like bunting. Basketball courts. A basketball court every 400 meters, I swear to you. Some of them just a hoop nailed to a coconut tree. Diesel and something frying. Roosters in cages by the road. She was at the terminal in Bogo. And with her were 2 cousins. Now. I want to be accurate about my reaction. I was disappointed for about 1 second, and then I was pleased. I thought, this is a woman who does not go alone to meet a strange foreign man off a bus. I thought it was proper. Modest. My mother would have approved, is what went through my head, which is a strange thing to think when you are 52 and sweating through a shirt in the Visayas. I have since had it explained to me that when a foreigner arrives, the family arrives. Not to protect her, to receive him. The first day was quiet. She had a room booked for me at a small place near the plaza, P900 a night, about 160 kroner, and she went home to her mother at 9 like a schoolgirl. I lay under a ceiling fan listening to karaoke from 2 streets over, somebody murdering my way, then somebody else murdering it better, and church bells at some hour, and roosters starting around 3:30, which is earlier than anyone tells you. Day 2 was the family. They did it at the house in the barangay, 20 minutes out on a tricycle. Concrete block bottom half, tin roof, an extension of bamboo and ply on the side. Nanay Delia came out first and took my hand and put it to her forehead, which I didn't know to expect and did wrong, and everybody laughed in a way that was kind rather than not. Then the rest. 4 siblings, 2 sisters, Rosalie and Anne. Jomar, the youngest brother, mid-20s, restless sort of lad. Couldn't sit still, kept getting up to check his phone. And another brother whose name I got wrong for 2 days. Then cousins. I counted 11, and I probably missed some, plus children, plus a neighbor, plus a woman who I understood on day 9 was not related to anybody at all. There was a lechon, a whole pig, and I want you to understand what that means to a man who spent 31 years doing exactly this. It came in on a bamboo pole, skin like glass, and the 2 men carrying it looked at me, and I looked at it, and I said something about the shoulder that made them very happy. And then somebody put a knife in my hand. Best afternoon of my life, honestly. I'm not being sarcastic. Best afternoon. They sat me in the good chair. There was one good chair, a wooden one with arms, and it was mine for 2 weeks, and nobody ever sat in it when I wasn't there, and nobody ever explained why. The karaoke machine went on at 4 and stopped at 11. I'd brought pasalubong. I'd read about it on some forum at midnight in Gaevla, that you bring gifts, that it matters. So at Doha, I'd panic-bought chocolate, 4 boxes of it, and some perfume. And they were pleased, but the thing I noticed was that they were pleased the way you are pleased when someone does a thing correctly. Not surprised, not overwhelmed. Correct. Like a man taking his hat off indoors. That should have told me something about what category I had already been put into. It didn't. Here's what did the damage, though. And I've thought about this a great deal. 2 weeks, and nobody asked me for anything. Not a peso. Not a hint. Nanay Delia washed my shirts, took them off the chair and did them by hand in a basin and hung them, and would not discuss it. Rosalie made me sinigang because Bing told her I'd said I liked sour. The neighbors started calling me Kuya Gunnar, Kuya meaning older brother, and children I did not know came and held my fingers and were shooed away. And I sat in the good chair in the middle of all of it, with a San Miguel going warm in my hand, and I thought about the reception after my mother's funeral. 17 people. My food. Nobody sat with me. Here I was, a stranger, who could not speak 4 words of Bisaya, and there was not one moment of any day where I was alone in a room. If I stood up, somebody asked where I was going. If I went to the shop, somebody came. When I was tired at 9 at night, Nanay Delia would send everyone out of the room. Do you see it? I don't need you to agree with what I did afterward. I just need you to see that part. There were things in front of me that I looked directly at and did not read. 2 of the neighbor women had husbands in Saudi. One driving, one on a building site, 6 years and 4 years. They spoke about it the way you'd speak about a man being at work. He is at Saudi. He sends every month. He came home last Christmas. Millions of them do this. 10% of the whole country, more or less, living somewhere else so the money can come back. I thought that was tragic and admirable and nothing to do with me. I heard the word Kano probably 30 times that fortnight. Somebody's boy shouting it in the road. I asked Bing, and she said, it just means American, it means foreigner, it's nothing, which is true. It also means a man who has money, and it means the family with a kano is a family that has done well, and everyone in that barangay knew inside of one day that the Oberg fella was in the good chair at Delia's. I saw a woman I did not know point me out to another woman I did not know. I was flattered. The last morning, Bing and Jomar took me back down to Cebu on the bus, and we sat in the pickup area at Mactan with about an hour to kill, and I told her I wanted to send more every month. She said no. Again. She said the 6 was already too much. And I stood there in the heat with my bag by my leg, and I pushed, the way I'd pushed 9 months before, and I said a number, and the number was P18,000, around 3,000 kroner. Call it $320. Nobody asked me for it. I want that on the record, because it's the part that took me longest to understand. Nobody asked me for a single thing in 14 days. I offered it standing in an airport car park because I could not stand the thought of getting on the plane and going back to a flat where I woke at 4 with nothing to break down. I paid for the chair. That's what that was. I just didn't know yet that's what I was doing. I got home in the middle of March, and Gavle was still frozen, and the flat was exactly as I'd left it, which somehow annoyed me. 14 days of 11 people in a room, and then a hallway, with my own coat on the hook. That's when the missing started. You can't miss something you've never had. Now I'd had it. So the calls became daily. Every day, and I mean every single day. And I was the one who was there first. 6 in the morning my time, noon hers. She'd be on her break by the loading door at the back of the Mercury Drug, and I'd already be sat at the kitchen table with coffee going cold. I bought a notebook and started writing down Bisaya, Kaon, Salamat, Gigutom ko. My accent was apparently very funny, and I let them laugh, because when they laughed at me, they were also including me, and I understood the difference by then. Month 13, Nanay Delia's gallbladder. It came through Bing at night, and she was so ashamed of asking that she couldn't get to the point for about 4 minutes. Her mother had been in pain for a week and wouldn't say. Then Cebu doctors, then a private hospital in Bogo, gallstones, they wanted it out. She sent photographs of the estimate, actual photographs of the paper, itemized, and then a second set 2 days later when it was revised. P95,000, about 16,000 kroner. $1,700, roughly. You need to understand how it works there, because I didn't. No insurance for most people. PhilHealth pays a slice, and the slice is not much. And you don't get treated, and then get a bill in the post, like here. You pay before, or you pay as you go, and if you can't, then the family raises it. That is the mechanism. There is no other mechanism. Somebody's tricycle gets sold, somebody's pig gets sold, somebody who is abroad sends it. I paid it inside the hour. And here's the part 1,000 not proud of. I felt good. Not good like a saint. Good like a man who has been made useful again after 2 years of walking by a river. Somebody needed a thing done, and I could do it, and it got done. And I sat in my kitchen afterward with the phone face down, and I felt more like myself than I had since the shop. I want anybody watching to sit with that for a second, because that's not being scammed. That's a hole in a man, and the hole doing what holes do. Second visit was July, month 16. 3 weeks that time. Nanay Delia was up and about and cooked for me the first night with a scar under her ribs. She showed me like a trophy. And a few days in, Jamar brought up the tricycle. Not directly. Nothing there is direct. It came through Bing over 2 or 3 days, in pieces. Jomar has no work. Jomar is driving for somebody else and giving that man most of it. If Jomar had his own unit, he'd have income. And if he had income, then the family would need less. Less. That was the word that did it. 185,000 for the motorcycle, and the sidecar built, and the paperwork. About 31,000 kroner. Call it $3,300. And I ate it up, honestly, because it wasn't charity, it was a business. That's what I told myself, and that is what I still half believe. I ran a business for 19 years. I know what a small operation looks like. I went and looked at the unit before I paid, walked around it, checked the welds on the sidecar frame, sat on it, made them start it twice. I inspected that tricycle the way I'd inspect a carcass hanging in a chill room, and I stood up and said it was sound. I was very pleased with myself that day. There's a photograph of me standing next to it, with my arms crossed like an idiot. There was a blessing. A priest came out from the parish and did the thing with the water on the handlebars, and about 30 people came. And Jomar made a speech in Bisaya, and then in English for me. And he said, I remember it exactly, he said, Kuya Gunnar, God sent you to this family. He meant it. That's the thing. When I go back over all of it now, that's the sentence I keep picking up and turning over. And I still cannot find a lie in it. He meant every word. It just didn't mean what I thought it meant. The tuition started that same trip. 2 nieces, Rosalie's girls, P30,000 a year between them, about 5,000 kroner, for the school fees and the uniforms and the books. Once. That's how it was put to me. It was never once. It was every year after that, and it was never mentioned again. It just went. And I never asked, and I'd have been embarrassed to ask. Now, the flags. Let me line them up, since I've had plenty of time to. The tricycle income never came up again. Not one time in 3 years did anyone tell me what it earned. And I told myself, small business is hard. First year is always bad. I, of all people, know that. Every request came through Bing. Never from Delia, never from Jomar, never from Rosalie. Always Bing, always apologetic, always with photographs. I told myself she was protecting me from them, standing between me and her family like a gate. She was standing between us. That much was true. I had the direction wrong. Her own wages we never discussed after that first month. P13,500, and I knew P8,000 went home. What I never asked was what happened to that P8,000 once my P18,000 was arriving. I don't know the answer, even now. Not my business, I said. My money, but not my business. That's the arithmetic of a man who doesn't want to know. And a cousin added me on Facebook, Mylene, I think, and she wrote on some photo of the tricycle, Our foreigner is very kind. Our foreigner. I looked at that for a while and decided it was a translation thing. English isn't their first language, I thought. They speak it beautifully, but the shading is different. It wasn't a translation thing. It was the most accurate English anybody used about me in 3 years. By the end of that second year, I sat down at the kitchen table on a Sunday with a pen and actually added it. The P6,000 stretch, then P18,000 a month, the gallbladder, the tricycle, the school, the flights, the odd P5,000 here for a birthday, or a fiesta, or somebody's roof. Roughly 27,000, about 120,000 kroner. $13,000. And I looked at it, and I was not worried. That's the honest report. I had over 1 million kroner still sitting there, and every morning I opened the bank, and the number was still large, and I thought, this is what it's for. This is finally what it's for. A man who has never had money has no instinct for it. I could tell you the price of a kilo of anything. I could not tell you what 120,000 kroner a year does to a pile over 3 years. But the number was still large, and in Bogo there was a chair with arms that nobody sat in when I wasn't there. The store came first. Year 3, the spring. Bing wanted a sari-sari, a proper one, Not the little window in the wall that half the barangay runs, but an extension built onto the side of the house with a concrete floor and shelving and a chest freezer for ice and soft drinks. 140,000, about 23,000 kroner, $2,500. And I liked this one. I liked it more than the tricycle, because this one was hers, something with her name on it that ran whether or not I was breathing. They built it in 6 weeks. She sent photos of every stage, the blocks going up, the freezer arriving on a tricycle sidecar with 3 men holding it, the first stock laid out on the shelves, sachets of shampoo, Tide, Lucky Me noodles, San Miguel, load cards, sacks of rice by the door. 4 months later, her Tita baby was running it. Nobody announced this. There was no meeting about it. It just gradually became the case, and when I asked, Bing said Tita baby was helping because Bing was at the pharmacy all day, which is a completely correct answer to the question I asked. It wasn't the question I meant. I let it go. I've let a lot of things go by saying, in my head, family helps. Which is true, it's just not a full sentence. Then the marriage talk started, and it came from Nanay Delia. Not to me. Never to me. It went to Bing, and Bing brought it to me on the video call, laughing, half embarrassed. Nanay is asking again, when will you make it proper? And there was church in it. There's always church in it. Nanay Delia went to Mass at Santa Rita every Sunday, and once during the week, and by the 3rd year, she was praying for me by name, which I was told about like a piece of news. She used to say it was God's plan, that I came, that her gallbladder happened when it happened because otherwise she'd have gone on saying nothing. I'm a Swede. We're Lutheran on paper and atheist in practice. My father was buried by a priest who'd never met him. So when a woman puts her hand on your arm and tells you God sent you across the world, part of you thinks, well, that's a nice way to put it. And part of you, and I'm being honest, part of you enjoys it enormously. Being sent. Being for something. I never got round to the marriage. I'll come back to that. The house. I want to do this part slowly, because this is the part people write to me about. Foreigners cannot own land in the Philippines. Full stop. No workaround. That's in their constitution, and it has been since 1935. I knew this. Nobody hid it from me. I read it on 3 different websites in Gavel before I ever bought a plane ticket, and I understood it perfectly. What foreigners can own is a condominium unit. Up to 40% of a building can be foreign-owned, and you get an actual title with your actual name on it. I looked at that seriously. 2-bedroom in Mandaue, near a mall, around P4 million. 670,000 kroner, $70,000. In my name. Mine. I sat with that option for about a week, and I turned it down. And I want to be very clear that nobody talked me out of it. Bing never once said, don't buy a condo. I talked myself out of it. Alone. At a kitchen table in Sweden. Because a flat in Mandaue was 3 hours from Bogo. And there was nobody in Mandaue who would wash my shirts or shout Kuya Gunnar across a road. The whole point was the barangay. The whole point was the chair. So, build a house. Next to Delia's, on Delia's land, which was titled in her name, and had been in that family since her husband's people. P1.4 million, 235,000 kroner. About $24,000. 3 bedrooms, concrete, proper tin roof with insulation, tiled floor, a real kitchen and a real bathroom, which in that barangay puts you in the top few houses. Paid in 4 tranches over about 11 months. And every tranche came with an estimate and photographs and receipts. Because that never stopped. That woman documented everything to the last sack of cement. It went over. Of course it went over. First quote was 1.15 million. Then rebar prices went up. Then the septic needed something. Then they said the original roof spec wouldn't hold in a typhoon, and it needed better trusses, which, I'm not a builder, but I have run a business, and every single one of those revisions was probably true. They were just also all in one direction. Third visit was month 34. I stayed 2 months, the longest I ever managed on a tourist visa without doing the extension dance more than once, and I slept in the finished house. And those were the best weeks of my adult life. I'll say it plainly. I got up at 4 because roosters, and I'd walk down to where the boats come in and buy fish off men who knew my name, and I'd carry it back and cook it, and there'd be 6 people at the table by 7 in the morning who hadn't been invited, because you don't invite people, they just come. Somebody's child slept in my second bedroom for 3 weeks, and I never established whose. I was happy. That's not a stupid man's word. I was happy, and I had bought it, and it was worth what I paid. And in the middle of that, sitting outside in the evening with a San Miguel and the karaoke starting up at the neighbors, I said to Bing, casually, like a man saying he might repaint a fence, I said, I think I'll sell the flat in Gavla and just live here. She said, that would be wonderful. Then she changed the subject. Not sharply. She asked about something else, the way you do, and I didn't notice for about 2 days. So I brought it up again, and this time she said we should wait until the store is stable. Which, fine. Reasonable. Sensible woman. Then about a week later I brought it up a 3rd time, and she said we should wait because of my sister, that maybe things with Katerina would improve, and I'd want to be near. And I sat there thinking, I have not mentioned my sister in 4 months. 2 different reasons. A week apart. Neither of them the reason. And here's the one that actually got under the skin. Nana Delia, at the table, talking about the fiesta in September, said something like, when you go back to Sweden, you will bring the chocolate again. When you go back to Sweden. Not if. Not a question. A fixed feature of the world, like the tide. The house was built, the money was arriving, and in the family's understanding of the arrangement, Gunnar goes back to Sweden. That's what Gunnar does. That's the shape of it. I didn't say anything. Saving face works both ways. You learn quickly that you don't put a question directly to people when you might not like the answer, because then everyone has to live with it out loud. I flew home in November, sat at the kitchen table in Gavle with the pen again. Roughly 2.6 million all in by then, about 440,000 kroner, getting on for $45,000. More than a third of everything I had in 3 years, and I remember looking at that figure and feeling, nothing much, actually. Because there was a concrete house with my kitchen in it, 8,000 kilometers away, standing on ground that would never in any circumstance be mine. I knew that. I want to be honest about this, because people always assume I didn't. I knew every legal fact in this story before I spent a krona. I just thought the facts weren't the point. I went back in May. Fiesta season in Bogo. Santa Rita, the last week of May. The whole town does it. Buntings across the street, a stage in the plaza, 3 days of noise. And I asked Jomar about the tricycle. 3 years. 3 years I hadn't asked, and I picked the worst possible evening to start. We were at the back of the house with a case of Red Horse between 5 of us, and the karaoke going at Nane's neighbors, and I said it lightly. The way you do, I said. So, Jomar, how is the trike doing now? Is it earning? And he looked at me. I've thought about that look a great deal. It wasn't guilt. It was the look a man gives you when you ask a question he assumed you already knew the answer to, and now he has to work out why you're pretending. He said the trike was gone. Sold about a year and a half back. He'd told Bing. Then, because he was drunk, and because I think he was actually offended, genuinely offended, that I'd asked in that tone in front of his cousins, he kept going. He said, "Kuya, you know we were praying for this." Since Bing was 30, Nane was praying. Every Sunday. Ata Bing was the eldest. She has to carry us. And there is no way to carry 5 people on a pharmacy salary. So we prayed for someone. And God sent you. He said it exactly like that. God sent you. Same words as the blessing at the tricycle, 3 years earlier, the words I'd carried around like a medal. And then he said the thing that finished it. He put his hand on my shoulder and he said, "And you have been very good to us. Better than we hoped." He meant it as praise. That's what I cannot get past even now. There was no cruelty in it. He was thanking me. He was drunk and aggrieved about a tricycle. And he was also, in the same breath, telling me I had performed my function above expectation. I sat there with a warm red horse and the karaoke going, and I did not say anything for a long time, because what came over me was not one thought. It was 3 years of small things all standing up at once. The cousins at the bus terminal. Not chaperones. A reception committee. The receipts, I realized, sitting there, that the receipts stopped somewhere around month 10. Just stopped. I never noticed because by then I'd decided the question was settled. Tita baby in the store. Not helping. Operating a family asset. Every request routed through Bing, always. I'd told myself she stood between me and them like a gate. She did stand between us. She was the interface. She was the one they sent, because she was the one I would say yes to. The word kano, 30 times a fortnight, which I'd been told meant nothing. Mylene, on Facebook, our foreigner. The most honest English anybody used about me in 3 years. And Nana-Delia, when you go back to Sweden, not a slip, not a cultural thing about tenses. A statement of the arrangement. I go back to Sweden. That is what I'm for. I go back, and it arrives on the 15th. I have said, more than once in this story, that I could look at a whole animal and see every cut it would become. 31 years, and I was never once wrong about that. Never. Sitting on a plastic stool behind a house in Bogo, I understood that I had never once been right about a person. Not one. Not my brother. Not my sister. Not my father who wrote a will and told nobody. And not this family, who I had read completely wrong for 3 years, while looking directly at them the entire time. That's the thing that actually took the legs out. Not the money. The realizing that the instrument I'd trusted my whole life doesn't work on people. I confronted Bing the next afternoon. In the house. My house, or the house I paid for, whichever way you want to say it. She didn't cry. I want to be very clear about that, because the version everybody expects is the one where she cries and begs, and if you're waiting for it, it doesn't come. She got angry. Properly angry. Angrier than I'd ever seen her, and she stood in the kitchen I'd paid for and she said, "So what did you want? You wanted I should let my mother's roof leak so you can feel romantic?" I said something about being used, and she said, "When did I lie to you?" And I stood there, and I went through it. And I want you to hear this part carefully, because one have had 2 years to check the ledger, and I keep coming out the same way. She never lied. She told me about the 4 siblings in week 2. She told me her salary and what went home. She refused money 3 times, and I pushed. Every hospital bill was real. Every receipt she did send was genuine. The house is standing, and it's a good house. She never had another man. Never had another foreigner. never asked me for a peso for a fake emergency, never did one single thing that a court in Sweden would call fraud. The only thing she never told me was what I was for. And she did say, that I never asked. And that's true too. Then she said the sentence I still hear. She said, "What did you think the money was?" Not angry when she said that one. Just baffled. Genuinely, honestly baffled. The way you'd look at a man who'd been coming to your shop every week for 3 years and suddenly asked why there was meat in it. Because in her world, there is no line between those two things. Loving a man and being carried by him. Her father drowned when she was 19, and she has been carrying 4 people since. Her whole town does this. The husband's in Saudi, the sisters in Hong Kong, the boy in Dubai. 10 million of them, sending it home. Nobody there thinks a woman is a liar for loving the man who makes the roof stop leaking. They think she's lucky. They think he's good. She loved me. I'll say that on the record, and I'll fight anybody who says otherwise. She also needed me, and she never once understood why those two facts were supposed to cancel each other out. And they don't, do they? That's the part. In her arithmetic, they don't cancel. They multiply. In mine, they cancel completely. And I had never in my life examined why. I didn't shout. Swedes don't. And anyway, there wasn't anything to shout about that would survive being said out loud. We stood in that kitchen for a while, and then she said, "Are you leaving?" And I said yes. And she said, "Okay." Just that. Okay. And she went to help her mother with something. Nobody was a villain. That's the worst possible outcome for a story like this, and it's the one I got. I didn't go straight to the airport. I went down to Cebu City and got a room in a cheap place off Fuente Osmeña, paying 400 a night, aircon that rattled, and I stayed there 14 days doing essentially nothing. I didn't answer messages. She sent some. Not many, actually. 3 or 4 the first week, and then 1 every couple of days. Nothing dramatic. Nothing begging. Mostly I walked, which is what I do, apparently, when things end. I walked to Robinson's and back in that heat like a lunatic, and I ate at a Mang Inasal near the university most days because the pork barbecue was 120, and I couldn't be bothered to decide anything more complicated than that. And on about day 5, I went to see a lawyer. Filipino chap, small office in a building on Osmeña Boulevard, aircon unit dripping into a bucket. I laid it out. Money paid, house built, land in Delia's name, no marriage, no company, nothing on paper anywhere with my name on it. He was very kind about it. He'd clearly done this conversation before. He said what I already knew, which is that under their constitution, a foreigner cannot own land, that a building follows the land in Philippine law, unless there's a specific arrangement, a long lease, a separate agreement, something registered. And there wasn't. He asked if there'd been any written agreement at all. There had not. 3 years, 440,000 kroner, and not one piece of paper. He said I could try to argue an implied trust in the courts. Years. Money. Probably lose. He also said, and he said it carefully, because he was being decent, that even if I won, the enforcement would mean putting a widow out of a house in a barangay where everyone knows everyone. I said no, immediately. And I want to be clear, this was not nobility. A Swede who flies 8,000 kilometers to sue a 68-year-old woman with a gallbladder scar. That's a man in a story I don't want to be in. I'd rather have the money gone than be that. So I flew home in June. 690,000 kroner left. About $68,000. That's the honest figure, all in, after 3 years, and the flights and the fiestas and everything I've told you. I'm not destitute. I want to say that plainly because I know what these stories usually sound like, and I refuse to make mine worse than it was. I still have most of a modest life savings, which is more than a lot of men my age. I'm not on the street, but I'm 55 now, no shop, no house. I rent a 2-room in Gävle, and a Swedish state pension is still 10 years off for me. And when it comes, it'll be smaller than it would have been because of the years I put nothing in. I took a job, part-time, at a meat wholesaler out by the industrial estate, 3 days a week. And there is a lad of about 26 there who has explained to me more than once how to trim a shoulder. I let him. It's fine. It's actually fine. I called Katarina once, last autumn, my sister. I'd rehearsed it in the car, and then, when she picked up, I said something about a birthday, and she said something about being busy, and we were off the phone in 90 seconds. She wasn't cruel. That's the thing about my family. Nobody's ever cruel. They just aren't there. I might try again. I've said that for a year. Bing messages on my birthday. Every year. Both years now. Nothing else. She's not asking for anything. Hasn't asked for a peso since the day I left. Which I want on the record, because people assume otherwise. And I believe she means it. I've turned it over enough times. I think she genuinely thinks of me warmly. And I think she also filed me under a category I didn't know existed. And both of those are just true at the same time. Nanidelia lives in my house. 68, gallbladder out, a proper roof over her. Rosalie's 2 girls both finished school on my money, and the older one is a nurse in Cebu City now, at a private hospital, earning maybe $22,000 a month. And I'm proud of that. I am. There's a girl with a profession because a Swedish butcher had an inheritance he didn't know what to do with. And if you want to tell me that's $45,000 well spent, I won't argue very hard. I just wish somebody had told me that's what I was buying. That's all. I wish I'd known I was buying it instead of thinking I was buying something else. So, the question, why do they want us? I've heard the answers. It's love. It's money. They're all after a visa. They're all victims. Whatever you like. Everybody's got an opinion, and most of them are cheap. Here's mine, for what it's worth, from a man who got it wrong for 3 years. Nobody in that family ever asked whether I was loved. That question never came up. It's not a question they'd think to ask. What they asked, from the first week, quietly, the way you'd check whether a roof will hold, was whether I was needed, whether I was useful. And I said yes. I said yes 100 times, with a lichen in front of me and a chair with arms under me. And every single time I said it, I thought I was answering a completely different question. That's it. That's the whole thing. She never lied to me. Not once. She just answered the question her whole life had trained her to ask, and I answered a question nobody had asked me. And the reason I fell for it, not the reason she did it, the reason I fell for it, is that I'd just found out my own family didn't need me for anything at all. 17 people ate my food, and nobody sat with me. Then, 8,000 kilometers away, a room full of people needed me very badly. Of course, I went. Anybody would go. So don't ask her if she loves you. She'll say yes, and she'll probably mean it. And it won't tell you a single thing. Ask yourself what you're for. And if you can't answer that, if you don't know what job you're doing in that house, then you're not in a relationship yet. You're in a position. You want to know if I regret it? Some days, no. That's the honest answer. And it's taken me 2 years to be able to say it, without feeling stupid. Some days, I sit in Gavelo in February, and I think about 4 in the morning in Bogo, walking down to where the boats come in, and 6 people at my table by 7 who I never invited. I paid for that. Fine. I'd have paid something. I just didn't know I was paying. And that's not their crime. That's mine. That's Gunner's story. And it's a difficult one to sit with, because there's no villain in it. Nobody stole from him. Nobody faked a hospital bill or ran a second boyfriend on the side. He was never once lied to, in any sense a court would recognize. What happened to Gunner happens to a lot of men, and it happens in the gap between 2 completely different ideas of what a relationship is for. On one side, a Western idea. Love is a thing you feel, and money is separate, and mixing them is corruption. On the other, a reality shaped by 10 million overseas workers, by eldest daughters who've been carrying families since they were teenagers, by utang na loob, by a healthcare system where the family is the insurance. In that world, providing isn't the opposite of loving. It's how loving is done. Neither of those is a lie, but they don't translate, and the exchange rate between them is brutal. 2 practical things, because this channel exists to save you money as well as heartache. Foreigners cannot own land in the Philippines, not through a girlfriend, not through a wife, not through a handshake with her mother. If you build on family land, you have built them a house. Understand that before the first sack of cement, not after. A condominium in your own name is the one route where the title says what you think it says. And get things written down. Long-term lease on the lot, a registered agreement, something. Gunner spent 3 years and roughly $45,000 without a single sheet of paper, and every lawyer he eventually spoke to told him the same thing. But the real lesson here isn't legal, and Gunner said it better than I can. Before you ask whether she loves you, work out what role you're filling. If a family has been waiting a generation for someone to go abroad, and abroad walks in the door instead, that's not a scam. That's arithmetic. It's just arithmetic you've been written into without being shown the sum. Thanks for watching. If this one hit close to home, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments. We read them all. Until next time. This has been Inside the Philippines.